was early morning in a small-town diner off Route 16, the kind of place where regulars ordered the same breakfast every day, and strangers stood out instantly. The bell above the door jingled as Steven Seagal stepped inside, sunglasses on, jacket zipped halfway. He had stopped by for a quiet breakfast before heading to a charity event in the area. The diner smelled of butter and coffee, with an old jukebox humming softly in the corner. But it wasn't Seagal who caught the staff's attention. It was the man who'd walked in just before him. A middle-aged black man, dressed in worn jeans and a faded gray jacket, had taken a seat at a corner booth by the window. His demeanor was calm, confident, almost peaceful. When the waitress approached, notebook in hand, she gave him a quick once-over, a look full of quiet judgment. "What'll it be?" she asked flatly. "Just toast and coffee, please," the man replied with a kind smile. The waitress rolled her eyes. "That all? Guess we're keeping it cheap today." She turned sharply and walked away, whispering something to the cook behind the counter. The cook chuckled under his breath, tossing bread into the toaster without even glancing at the order slip. Steven Seagal, sitting a few stools away, noticed every detail. He'd seen disrespect before, in boardrooms, in bars, and on the streets. But there was something about this moment that made him pause. The quiet man didn't react. He simply folded his hands, looked out the window, and waited patiently. Minutes passed. His toast never came. The waitress refilled other people's coffee, laughed with a table of regulars, and completely ignored him. Finally, she sauntered back with a cold, half-burnt plate of toast and a chipped mug of coffee. "Here you go," she muttered. The man thanked her politely, no anger, no bitterness. But as she turned away, Seagal heard her mutter under her breath, "People like him shouldn't even be in here." The words hit like a spark in a gasoline room. Seagal's jaw tightened. He put down his fork, watching closely as the man calmly buttered his toast. What happened next would make Steven Seagal stand, and the entire diner fall silent. The diner was filled with the clinking of plates and the soft hum of the ceiling fan, but to Steven Seagal it all faded into silence. His eyes were fixed on the man in the corner, calm, quiet, and somehow dignified despite the mistreatment he was facing. The waitress, a woman named Carla, moved around briskly, acting like nothing was wrong. Every few minutes she'd glance toward the man, whisper something to the cook, and both of them would smirk. The man didn't seem to notice, or maybe he just didn't care to respond. Seagal, seated at the counter, stirred his coffee slowly. He'd spent years studying people, their body language, their tone, their intent. What he saw now was something he'd seen too many times: power abused in small, ugly ways. Finally, Carla strutted back to the counter, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Guess some people think they can just sit around here all morning for a $2 order," she said to the cook. The cook snickered. "Maybe he's waiting for a handout." A few customers looked up, uncomfortable, but no one said a word. Seagal set his cup down with a quiet click. His sharp blue eyes followed every move. At that moment, the man finished his toast, took a small sip of his now cold coffee, and politely raised his hand. "Excuse me, miss?" Carla turned, irritated. "What now?" The man smiled faintly. "Could I get the check, please?" Carla scoffed. "You sure you can afford it?" A hush fell over the room. Even the cook froze for a second, realizing she'd gone too far. The man didn't flinch. He simply looked her in the eyes, calm but piercing, and said softly, "Yes, I can." The simple words carried more weight than any insult she could throw. Seagal shifted in his seat. He could feel something building, a tension that didn't belong in a small-town diner, but in moments like this, it always surfaced. He'd seen it his entire life. People who thought cruelty made them strong. Carla scribbled the check and tossed it onto the table, the paper landing next to the half-eaten toast. "There, don't forget to tip." The man looked down at the slip, pulled out a crisp $100 bill and placed it gently on the table. "This should cover it," he said. Carla blinked. "What?" He stood, smoothing the wrinkles on his jacket. "Keep the change." Before she could react, the bell above the door jingled again. A young busboy rushed in from the kitchen, breathless. He looked around the diner, then whispered something into Carla's ear. Her face changed instantly. All the smugness drained away. She glanced at the man, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Wait, him? Are you sure?" The busboy nodded nervously. I heard Mr. Douglas say it himself in the office. That's him. The owner. Carla's jaw dropped. She turned pale, stumbling a step backward. Oh my God! Seagal's eyebrow arched. The owner? He leaned slightly to the side, watching the scene unfold. The cook had gone quiet, suddenly pretending to be busy scrubbing the counter.
The entire diner, moments ago noisy with casual chatter, had gone still as a church. Carla stammered, her voice trembling now.
Sir, I didn't realize. The man turned to her with that same calm expression. You didn't have to, he said simply. You should treat everyone the same, whether they own the place or not. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the jukebox seemed to hush mid-song. Seagal slowly stood up, his imposing frame commanding instant attention. He looked straight at Carla, his tone low but sharp. You know, he said, I've met a lot of tough people in my life. But kindness, that's real strength. You might want to remember that. Carla's eyes darted between Seagal and the man, guilt washing over her face. The man gave Seagal a small nod of gratitude. Two strangers who didn't need words to understand each other. Seagal nodded back, then turned toward the rest of the diner. It's funny, he said. You can learn more about people from how they treat someone who can't do anything for them than from how they treat someone who can. A few customers nodded quietly, ashamed they hadn't spoken up earlier. Carla swallowed hard, finally whispering, I'm sorry. The man smiled again, gentle, almost forgiving. It's never too late to start over. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small card, and placed it on the counter next to her. That's for the next staff meeting. Attendance is mandatory. Carla took it with trembling hands. Printed in gold letters were the words, Douglas Freeman, owner and founder, Freeman's Family Diner. Her knees nearly gave out. Seagal glanced at the card, then at the stunned faces around him. Well, he said with a faint grin, I guess breakfast just got interesting. If you were sitting in that diner, would you have spoken up or stayed silent? And tell us, which country and city are you watching from right now? Let's see how far this story travels. Carla's fingers trembled as she stared down at the gold-printed business card. Douglas Freeman, owner and founder, Freeman's Family Diner. She couldn't even look him in the eye. The man she'd just mocked for ordering toast was the very person who signed her paycheck. A wave of whispers swept across the diner like a gust of wind. Wait, did she say owner? Someone murmured. He's the boss. Another gasped. Within seconds, every booth, every stool, and every corner of the small diner was buzzing. People who had been eating quietly now turned to watch in stunned silence. The air felt heavy. Shame, disbelief, curiosity, all rolled into one. Douglas Freeman didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He stood there calmly, his presence filling the room more powerfully than any shout could. He took a deep breath and looked at Carla, who still stood frozen, red-faced behind the counter. Ma'am, he said softly, I came in this morning like any other customer. I asked for toast and coffee, nothing more. I didn't expect special treatment. I just wanted to see how people are treated when they don't look like they own anything. Carla's eyes glistened. Sir, please. I didn't know. I swear I didn't. He raised a hand gently. No, you didn't know, and that's exactly the problem. The words hit like a gavel. The customers glanced around uncomfortably, many lowering their heads, realizing they'd stayed silent while someone was being mistreated. Steven Seagal stepped forward from the counter, folding his arms. His deep voice carried through the room. He's right, Seagal said firmly. It's not about who someone is. It's about who you are when nobody's watching. Everyone turned toward him. Even Douglas smiled faintly, recognizing the man's face. Carla wiped her eyes, her voice trembling. I'm sorry, Mr. Freeman, I didn't mean to disrespect you. It was just what? Douglas interrupted softly. A bad day? A wrong assumption? He tilted his head, his tone still calm but cutting through every excuse. You serve people here every single day. How many others have you treated like that without realizing? Carla couldn't answer. Tears started falling silently down her cheeks. Seagal placed a hand on the counter and leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with the cook. And you, he said in that cold, commanding tone only he could deliver. You thought it was funny, didn't you? The cook froze mid-motion, a spatula dangling from his hand. I didn't mean anything by it. Yeah, you did, Seagal replied. You laughed. That was your choice. The room was dead silent now. Not even the ceiling fan dared to creak. Douglas reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a folded paper and placed it on the counter. This, he said, is a report I've been compiling for weeks. Complaints from customers about attitude, slow service, disrespect. I wanted to see for myself if they were true. Carla swallowed hard. And now you know. Yes, Douglas replied. Now I do. He turned to the crowd. I built this diner with one belief, that everyone, no matter who they are, should feel welcome here. This place was supposed to stand for community. But today I learned that even my own house forgot its foundation. Seagal nodded, his voice calm but firm. Sometimes you have to break something to rebuild it stronger. Douglas gave a slight smile. You're right. He looked back at Carla and the cook. You'll both finish your shifts today. After that, you'll attend a meeting tomorrow morning. We're not firing anyone yet, but we are changing everything. Carla blinked, confused. You're not firing me? No, he said. People make mistakes, but repeating them, that's a choice. The tension began to shift. Shame turned to relief. The customers, who had been silent witnesses to this moral reckoning, began to applaud softly, not out of joy, but out of respect. Douglas turned to leave, but before he reached the door, he stopped and looked back. One more thing, he said. Kindness costs nothing, but the lack of it can cost you everything. The room stayed silent even after he walked out. Only, Seagal moved. He stood, placed a tip on his table, and followed him out the door. Outside, the sun had just broken through the clouds, casting a warm glow across the parking lot. Seagal caught up to him. You handled that better than most men I've met, Seagal said. Douglas smiled. Anger doesn't teach, but example does. They shook hands. Two men of principle who understood that real strength comes from restraint, not rage. If you were that undercover boss, what would you have done? Stayed calm like Mr. Freeman or called them out on the spot? Tell me. Your thoughts below, and don't forget to drop your country and city so I know where my respectful viewers are watching from. The moment Douglas Freeman left the diner, the air seemed to collapse under its own weight. Conversations that once filled the room with chatter were now replaced by the faint hum of the ceiling fan and the quiet clinking of plates. Carla stood motionless behind the counter, her mascara running slightly down her cheeks. The cook avoided eye contact, pretending to scrub a spotless grill. The customers sat uneasily, each one aware they had just witnessed something much bigger than a simple misunderstanding over toast. Steven Seagal remained seated at his booth, calm as a mountain. His eyes followed Freeman through the window until the man disappeared from view. Then he turned back toward the shaken staff. You know, he said softly, his voice deep but not unkind. I've seen a lot of men in my life, soldiers, fighters, leaders. But what you just saw, that's a real man. Quiet power. No ego. Carla swallowed hard. He could have yelled at me, humiliated me in front of everyone, but he didn't. Seagal nodded. Because he didn't need to. When you know who you are, you don't have to prove it. At that moment, the diner's front door swung open again. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. But it wasn't Freeman returning. It was the diner's general manager, a middle-aged man in a crisp shirt and loosened tie, rushing in, his phone still pressed to his ear. Where is he? The manager barked, scanning the room. Where's Mr. Freeman? Carla hesitated. He just left. The manager froze, his face turning pale. He ended the call instantly. Oh no, no. He looked around as if the walls themselves were judging him. One of the waitresses whispered, What's going on? The manager sighed. You don't understand. Mr. Freeman's been visiting all the branches undercover for the past month. He's been checking service, behavior, everything. This was his final stop. A stunned silence followed. Even Seagal raised an eyebrow. The manager rubbed his forehead. If he left disappointed, this whole location could be shut down. Carla's breath hitched. Shut down? Yes, the manager said. He built this place from the ground up. Every detail, the menu, the music, the layout, it all came from him. He doesn't just run a business, he builds families. If he saw disrespect here, he'll see it as failure. Seagal leaned back in his seat, watching as panic spread like wildfire. He didn't say a word, not yet. The cook slammed his spatula on the counter. Great. Just great. Now we're all done for because of one bad moment. Carla's eyes filled again, but this time with guilt. It wasn't just one moment, she whispered. He was right. I've been short with people before. Rude. I always told myself it was just part of the job, but it wasn't. It was part of me. The manager opened his mouth, but Seagal stood up slowly, his shadow stretching across the room. You can fix this, he said, but not by panicking, not by fear. Everyone looked at him. You fix this, Seagal continued, by owning what happened. Call him. Tell him the truth. Don't make excuses. Just tell him you learned something. The manager blinked. You think that'll work? Seagal smirked faintly. It's worked for me more times than I can count. Carla nodded through her tears. He's right, I'll do it. She reached for her phone with trembling hands. The cook crossed his arms. What are you gonna say? Carla took a deep breath, thinking of the man's calm eyes, his steady tone, his quiet disappointment. I'll tell him thank you for showing me what kind of person I don't want to be anymore. The manager nodded and dialed Freeman's number. The diner waited in silence as the line rang. Mr. Freeman, the manager said quickly. Sir, I just heard what happened. Please, let us make this right. Seagal watched as the manager paused, listening. The entire room leaned in. Yes, sir, the manager continued. Carla wants to speak with you directly. He handed her the phone. Carla's hand shook as she pressed the phone to her ear. Mr. Freeman, it's me. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I treated you terribly and you had every right to be angry. But you weren't. You were kind. You showed more grace than I deserved. And I'll never forget it. There was a pause on the other end. Then Freeman's calm voice replied, Carla, it takes courage to admit when we're wrong. I don't hold grudges. I hold lessons. And today, I think we both learned something. Carla smiled through her tears. Yes, sir. We did. When she hung up, the diner felt lighter and like a storm had finally passed. The manager exhaled in relief. He said we'll be okay, he announced, but he's coming back tomorrow for breakfast. Seagal grinned. Then you'd better make the best toast he's ever had. The room erupted in soft laughter. Even the cook cracked a smile. The tension melted, replaced by determination and quiet gratitude. As Seagal stepped toward the door, Carla called out, Thank you, sir, for saying what needed to be said. He turned, his eyes kind, but steady. Don't thank me. Thank the man who didn't have to raise his voice to make the world hear him. He pushed open the door, letting the sunlight spill in, and disappeared into the street, leaving behind a diner forever changed. If you were in Carla's place, would you have called Mr. Freeman to apologize, or stayed silent and hoped it blew over? Be honest. I'm reading your answers. The next morning, Freeman's family diner looked different. The open sign flickered softly against the glass, but inside, the air wasn't filled with the usual noise. There was no laughter, no idle chatter, just quiet anticipation. Every employee was already in uniform an hour early, nervously fixing napkin holders and polishing cutlery that was already shining. Carla stood behind the counter, her hair tied neatly, her apron crisp. She hadn't slept much, but she didn't care. This wasn't about keeping her job anymore, and it was about earning her dignity back. The cook peeked through the kitchen door for the 10th time. You think he's really coming back? Carla nodded. He said he would. And when he says something, he means it. At 8:03 a.m., the soft jingle of the doorbell broke the tension. Every head turned. Douglas Freeman stepped in, calm, collected. wearing the same simple brown jacket from the day before. But this time he wasn't alone. Right behind him, tall, composed, and radiating authority, was Steven Seagal. The moment Seagal entered, the diner fell completely silent. A few customers already seated froze mid-bite. Phones slowly came out, cameras ready. They recognized the man instantly. Douglas smiled faintly. "Good morning, everyone." No one replied. Carla's hands trembled slightly as she set down a coffee pot. "Don't stop working because of me," Douglas said. "Pretend I'm just another customer." Carla managed a weak smile. "Yes, sir, good morning." She poured his coffee, steady this time. The cook, peeking out again, muttered, "You think he's testing us again?" Seagal overheard and smirked. "He's always testing, but mostly he's teaching." Douglas looked around the diner slowly, his eyes soft but observant. "Looks cleaner today," he said quietly. "Feels different too." Carla nodded. "It is, sir, and it will stay that way." He took a sip of his coffee, then gestured toward the booth near the window, the same one where Seagal had sat the previous day. "Mind if we sit there again?" "Of course," Carla said quickly. "It's yours." As the two men sat down, whispers rippled across the diner. "That's really him? And Seagal too? What's happening right now?" Seagal leaned slightly toward Douglas. "They're learning faster than some soldiers I've trained," he joked softly. Douglas smiled. "Fear's a great motivator, but I'd rather they learn from respect." A few minutes later, the manager approached nervously with a clipboard. "Mr. Freeman, sir, I just want to say—" Douglas raised a hand gently. "You don't need to rehearse an apology. I've heard enough of those in my lifetime. I just want to see how people treat each other when they think nobody's judging." The manager nodded and stepped back. Carla took a deep breath, approached the table, and placed a plate of toast and eggs in front of Douglas. "On the house, sir." Douglas looked up. "I appreciate that. But next time, don't offer things for free, offer them with kindness." Her lips curved into a genuine smile. "Understood." Seagal took a bite of his breakfast and nodded approvingly. Now this is how a diner's supposed to feel. Just then the door opened again, and a local news crew entered, cameras rolling. Apparently, word of yesterday's incident had spread online overnight. The video of the confrontation, recorded by a customer, had gone viral. Millions had seen the calm composure of Douglas Freeman, the undercover boss who taught a diner about respect. The reporter approached hesitantly. "Mr. Freeman, sir, we'd love a quick word. The internet is calling you the gentle boss." Douglas chuckled softly. "Is that so? I'm no hero. I just reminded people that how you treat others says more about you than any title ever could." The crowd clapped lightly. Seagal leaned back, smiling at the reaction. The reporter turned to Seagal. "Mr. Seagal, you were there yesterday, and any thoughts?" Seagal's tone was firm, his gaze unflinching. Power and kindness aren't opposites. Real strength isn't about control. It's about discipline, about knowing when not to strike. That's what this man showed everyone yesterday. Douglas gave him a grateful nod. Carla stepped forward timidly. "Sir, may I say something?" Douglas nodded. "Go ahead," she turned toward the cameras. "Yesterday I disrespected this man without knowing who he was. I judged him by how he looked. But he didn't yell, didn't insult me, and he showed me grace. And that changed everything for me." Her voice cracked slightly, but the room was silent, listening. "I don't deserve praise," she continued, "but I hope people watching remember. Sometimes the person you're judging could be the one who gave you the chance to work in the first place." The audience erupted in applause. Even the reporter looked emotional. Douglas stood, smiling warmly. "Carla, that's courage, and to admit and to change. You've made me proud today." He turned toward the cameras. "We'll all make mistakes, but what matters is whether we grow from them. This diner, my diner, will now start a kindness-first initiative. Every employee will get retrained not just in service but in empathy. Because great food means nothing without respect." The reporter nodded. "Beautifully said, sir." Seagal stood beside him, resting a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "The world needs more leaders like you and more people willing to listen." Douglas smiled, then looked back at Carla. "Now how about another round of toast? Let's make it a fresh start." Laughter broke out around the room. The tension that once clouded the diner was replaced by warmth. the kind that only comes after learning a hard but valuable lesson. As Seagal and Freeman sat back down, the camera zoomed out slowly, capturing the moment. Two men of quiet strength, surrounded by people forever changed by a simple act of respect. If you saw someone being disrespected in public, would you step in or stay silent? Be honest. What would you do in that moment? Comment below. By the next morning, Freeman's Family Diner wasn't just a local breakfast spot. It had become a global headline. Undercover boss exposes racism with class, not anger, one article read. The gentle boss and Steven Seagal teach America a lesson in respect, said another. News vans lined the street outside the small diner. Crowds gathered with cameras, some fans holding signs that read, "Be kind like Freeman and respect has no uniform." Inside, the place buzzed with energy. Every booth was full, every coffee pot running nonstop. Carla and the staff moved with a new kind of rhythm, not out of fear but pride. They smiled genuinely at customers, greeting everyone with warmth. Douglas Freeman sat quietly in his corner booth, sipping his usual coffee. Across from him, Steven Seagal sat like a calm guardian, his arms folded, eyes scanning the scene. "Never thought I'd see a diner turn into a movement," Seagal said. Freeman chuckled softly. "Neither did I just wanted to test the staff. Didn't realize I was testing the world." Seagal nodded. "Funny how truth works. Once it's seen, it can't be unseen." A local news anchor entered the diner with her crew, camera lights flashing. "Mr. Freeman," she said politely, "the whole country's talking about you. What's your message to those who've watched your video?" Douglas paused, then looked straight into the camera. "You know, people ask me why I didn't get angry. The truth is, anger's easy. Dignity takes strength. The moment you lose control, you lose the lesson." The crowd went quiet, hanging on every word. He continued, "I didn't walk into that diner as a boss. I walked in as a man who wanted to be treated with the same respect I give others. That's all any of us want, and the moment we forget that, we lose a piece of our humanity." Applause filled the diner. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes furiously, but not everyone outside was clapping. Across the street, a few critics gathered, holding signs saying, "Staged," and "Publicity stunt." Seagal noticed them immediately. He leaned slightly toward Douglas. "Looks like not everyone got the message," Douglas sighed. "There'll always be noise, but truth doesn't shout. It stands quietly." The door suddenly opened again and a familiar face walked in. Carla. This time she wasn't in uniform. She wore a simple blue dress, her eyes red but determined. She walked straight up to the reporters. "I want to say something," she said, her voice clear. The cameras turned toward her. "I was the one who disrespected Mr. Freeman," she admitted. "I judged him by what I saw, not by who he was. I was wrong. But this man didn't humiliate me. He taught me. He could have ruined my life, but instead he changed it. And for that, I'll always be grateful." There was silence for a few seconds, then thunderous applause. Even the critics across the street lowered their signs. Seagal stood, his deep voice cutting through the noise. "That right there, that's what redemption looks like. It's not weakness to admit you're wrong. It's power, the kind that changes people." The news anchor turned the microphone to him. "Mr. Seagal, you've seen the world. Trained soldiers faced danger, stood up to injustice. What made this moment special for you?" Seagal took a long pause before answering. His gaze was firm, his tone calm but commanding. "I've seen men fight wars," he said, "but I've rarely seen someone fight hate with peace and win. What Douglas did, what Carla did, that's what real courage looks like. No punches, no threats, no violence. Just truth." His words hit hard. Even through the camera lenses, you could feel the weight of his conviction. Freeman placed a hand on Seagal's shoulder. "Sometimes it takes a warrior to recognize peace as strength." Seagal smiled faintly. "And sometimes peace is the strongest weapon." Just then, a young girl from the crowd, no older than 10, approached the diner window, holding a small handwritten note. Carla noticed and opened the door for her. The girl walked up to Douglas shyly. "Mr. Freeman, I watched your video with my mom. She said I should always be kind, even if people aren't kind to me. So, thank you." Freeman's eyes softened. He took the note and read it. "Be kind first, always." He smiled warmly. "Thank you, sweetheart. You just reminded me why this matters." The girl smiled and ran back to her mother. Reporters captured the moment. the quiet power of kindness reaching a new generation. Seagal stood beside. Douglas's cameras continued to flash. "Looks like your diner's more than a business now," he said. Freeman nodded. "It's a mirror. It's showing people who they are and who they could be." Outside, the crowd began chanting softly, "Respect. Respect, respect." Freeman stood, raised a hand for silence, and said, "If you're watching this right now, wherever you are in the world, remember you don't need a title to make a difference. You just need the courage to be kind when it's hardest." The camera zoomed in. Seagal nodded beside him, his voice low but steady. "That's the truth. And the world better start listening. What would you have done if you were in Mr. Freeman's shoes? Stayed silent or spoken out? Tell me in the comments. And drop your country and city so we can see how far this message of respect is reaching." Within a week, Freeman's family diner had transformed from a small-town restaurant into a symbol of respect and redemption known around the globe. News stations from Tokyo to Toronto replayed the viral clip of Douglas Freeman standing tall and calm before the woman who had disrespected him. Social media overflowed with hashtags like "Why Be Kind First," "Gentle Boss," and "Respect Over Rage." But for Douglas Freeman, it wasn't about fame. It was about the change. Each morning, the diner opened its doors to more people than ever before. Families, truck drivers, even corporate CEOs stopping by just to experience the place that reminded the world that kindness still mattered. Carla now greeted every customer with a genuine smile. She didn't fake it anymore. Her good morning came from the heart, not obligation. The cook, once sarcastic and careless, now handed out meals with warmth and care. The entire diner had become what Douglas always dreamed of, a home for everyone. Steven Seagal visited often, always quietly, never seeking attention. He'd sit near the back booth, sipping black coffee, observing. He said little, but when he did, everyone listened. That morning, Douglas walked in to find Seagal already seated. "Back again?" he teased. Seagal smirked. "You make better coffee than most Hollywood sets." They both laughed softly, then sat together in comfortable silence. The TV above the counter played a news segment showing how schools were now adopting Kindness First Fridays, inspired by the diner's story. Douglas shook his head in disbelief. "Imagine that. All this because of one plate of toast," Seagal chuckled. "It's never about the toast, brother. It's about what's served with it. Respect." Just then, a group of college students entered, each wearing t-shirts that read, "Freeman's Lesson, Dignity Never Shouts." They approached Douglas's table nervously. "Sir," one of them said, "we drove 6 hours just to meet you. You changed how we see things. Our professor even showed your video in class." Douglas smiled, humbled. "You didn't come to see me. You came to see proof that people can change." The student nodded. "And you gave us that proof." Seagal leaned in. "Don't stop there. Carry it forward. Be the reason someone else believes again." The group nodded eagerly, taking photos, shaking hands, then leaving with smiles that carried hope. As they left, Carla came over with a tray of fresh coffee and pastries. "On the house," she said with a warm grin. Douglas raised an eyebrow. "Didn't I tell you not to give things away for free?" Carla winked. "I'm not giving them away, sir. I'm sharing them." "Big difference," he smiled proudly. "You've learned well." Outside, a light rain began to fall. Through the window, Douglas watched as people continued to line up under umbrellas just to step inside the diner. The world had become chaotic, but for a few minutes inside those walls, people remembered what decency felt like. A reporter entered quietly, recognizing both men. "Mr. Freeman, Mr. Seagal, the world's been waiting for your next message. Would you like to say something to everyone watching?" Douglas looked at Seagal, who gave a slight nod. Freeman stood and faced the small camera crew. "If you're watching this, know that it doesn't take money, power, or fame to make a difference. It takes courage. The courage to be kind when no one's watching. The world doesn't change from anger. It changes from understanding." He looked toward Carla, the cook, and the crowd inside the diner. "This place isn't just about food anymore. It's about second chances. About realizing that respect isn't something you earn with titles. It's something you give freely because it's right." The camera panned to Seagal, who spoke in his deep, composed tone. "Strength isn't in your fists. It's in your restraint. Power means nothing without compassion. And real justice begins when you treat the next person you meet with dignity, no matter who they are." The diner erupted in applause. Douglas placed a hand on Seagal's shoulder and said, "You've fought battles around the world. I've fought them in boardrooms, but this is the one that matters most." Seagal nodded. "Because this one heals instead of hurts." Outside, the rain eased into a soft drizzle as sunlight began to break through the clouds. People passing by stopped to wave at the two men through the window, cheering, clapping, recording the moment on their phones. Douglas turned to the camera one last time and said, "If you believe in respect, equality, and kindness, and not as words, but as actions, then carry this message with you. Every diner, every home, every street corner can become a place of peace if you choose it to be." He paused, then smiled. "Now go make the world a little kinder." The crowd cheered. Seagal gave a subtle nod and the screen slowly faded to black. If this story touched your heart, type respect in the comments and tell me which country and city you're watching from. Let's see how far this message of kindness can travel.